Love is often spoken about, written about, and desired by nearly everyone. Yet, despite all this attention, many people still feel confused, unfulfilled, or even lost when it comes to love. The reason is not that love is complicated, but that we often look for it in the wrong way. Love is often imagined as something that arrives from the outside. A person who understands you perfectly, who fills the silence within, who brings a sense of completeness you feel you have been missing. This idea is deeply appealing, yet it quietly creates a dependency that turns love into a search rather than an experience. When you believe that someone else is responsible for making you feel whole, you begin to place a weight on them that no human being can truly carry. And without realizing it, you move further away from the very love you are trying to find. To understand love more clearly, you must first turn your attention inward. Before you can connect deeply with another person, you must become familiar with your own inner world. This means noticing your thoughts, your emotional patterns, your expectations, and your fears. Many people enter relationships without this awareness, and as a result, they bring confusion into something that requires clarity. They expect understanding without understanding themselves. They seek stability while feeling unstable within. And this creates a quiet tension that slowly grows over time. When you do not know yourself, you begin to rely on others to define how you feel. A kind word lifts you, a small distance disturbs you, and a moment of silence creates doubt. Your emotional state becomes dependent on external reactions. In such a state, love becomes fragile because it is constantly being influenced by things outside your control. But when you begin to understand yourself, your needs, your triggers, your patterns, you create a sense of inner stability. From this place, love no longer feels like something you must hold on to tightly. It becomes something you can experience with openness. There is also a subtle difference between loneliness and inner emptiness. Loneliness is natural. It arises from the human desire to connect. But inner emptiness often comes from disconnection with yourself. If this emptiness is not addressed, you may try to fill it with attention, validation, or constant presence from another person. At first, it may feel comforting, but over time it creates pressure. The relationship becomes a source of relief rather than a space of genuine connection. And when that relief is threatened, fear appears. When you take the time to understand yourself, something shifts. You begin to see that your emotions are not caused by others, but by how you interpret and respond to situations. You recognize patterns that once felt automatic. You become aware of the moments when you seek reassurance, not because of what is happening, but because of what you feel inside. This awareness does not push people away. It allows you to meet them more honestly. Love, in its deeper sense, is not about completing what is missing. It is about sharing what is already present. When you are at ease within yourself, you do not approach relationships with urgency or fear. You approach them with curiosity and calmness. You are able to listen more, react less, and appreciate without constantly measuring what you receive in return. In this way, love becomes less about finding the right person and more about becoming the right state of being. And from that state, connection flows more naturally, without force, without pressure, and without the constant need to seek confirmation that you are enough. Awareness is often overlooked because it does not feel as immediate or dramatic as emotion, yet it is the quiet foundation upon which every healthy relationship is built. Without awareness, even sincere love can become tangled in misunderstanding. With awareness, even difficult moments can be approached with clarity and calmness. Many people move through relationships on autopilot. They react quickly, speak without reflection, and allow emotions to guide their actions without truly understanding where those emotions come from. In the moment, it feels natural to respond this way. A certain tone triggers irritation. A delayed reply creates doubt. A small disagreement turns into a larger conflict. But what is often missed is that these reactions are not only about the present situation, they are shaped by past experiences, personal insecurities, and unexamined expectations. When awareness is absent, you begin to assume rather than observe. You interpret situations through the lens of your fears instead of reality. A simple change in behavior from the other person may be seen as rejection. Silence may be interpreted as distance. And without realizing it, you start responding not to what is actually happening, but to what you believe is happening. This creates a gap between two people, a gap filled with misinterpretation. Awareness invites you to pause, not to suppress what you feel, but to understand it. When you feel discomfort, instead of immediately reacting, you begin to ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling and why? This small shift changes everything. It separates the emotion from the action. It allows you to see whether your reaction is coming from the present moment or from something deeper within you. As you develop this awareness, you start to notice patterns. You may realize that certain situations repeatedly trigger the same response. Perhaps you feel anxious when communication slows down, or defensive when you feel misunderstood. These patterns are not random. They are reflections of your inner state. When you become aware of them, you gain the ability to respond differently. Awareness also changes how you listen. Instead of preparing your response while the other person is speaking, you begin to truly hear them. You notice not only their words, but the intention behind them. This creates space for understanding. Many conflicts do not arise from a lack of love, but from a lack of being fully heard. When awareness is present, listening becomes deeper and communication becomes clearer. Another aspect of awareness is recognizing the difference between expectation and reality. Often, disappointment in relationships does not come from what the other person does, but from what you expected them to do. When these expectations are unspoken or unrealistic, they create silent pressure. Awareness allows you to see these expectations clearly. It gives you the choice to communicate them, adjust them, or release them. In moments of tension, awareness acts as a stabilizing force. Instead of reacting impulsively, you become more deliberate. You notice the urge to defend, to withdraw, or to control. And instead of immediately following that urge, you observe it. This observation creates space, and in that space, you find choice. You are no longer controlled by your emotions. You are guided by understanding. Over time, this way of relating transforms the dynamic between two people. Reactions become less intense, misunderstandings become less frequent, and the overall atmosphere becomes calmer. Not because challenges disappear, but because they are approached with a different quality of attention. When awareness becomes part of how you love, your actions are no longer driven by impulse alone. They are guided by clarity. And in that clarity, love becomes more stable, more respectful, and more deeply felt. Love is often confused with control in subtle and unnoticed ways. What begins as care can slowly turn into expectation. What feels like closeness can become dependency. And what is called love may, at times, be the fear of losing someone rather than the appreciation of having them. This confusion arises when love is approached as something to hold on to rather than something to experience. When there is a need to possess, there is always an underlying fear. The fear that the other person may change, may leave, or may not meet the image you have created in your mind. This fear leads to behaviors that try to secure the relationship, seeking constant reassurance, needing frequent validation, or trying to influence how the other person thinks and acts. At first, these actions may appear as signs of deep attachment, but over time, they create pressure. True love does not seek to restrict. It allows space. It recognizes that each person has their own thoughts, emotions, and path. When you try to control someone, even in small ways, you begin to limit the natural flow of the relationship. The other person may start to feel confined, unable to express themselves freely. And in that space, connection becomes weaker, even if both people still care deeply. Presence, on the other hand, is quiet and steady. It does not demand attention, it offers it. It is the ability to be fully with someone without needing to change them or the moment you are sharing. When you are present, you are not distracted by past experiences or future worries. You are simply there, attentive and open. This kind of presence creates a different quality of connection. Conversations become more meaningful because you are truly listening. Time spent together feels more genuine because it is not overshadowed by expectation. Even silence becomes comfortable because there is no pressure to fill it. When love is rooted in presence, there is also a deeper level of trust. You do not feel the need to constantly check, question, or control. You allow the relationship to unfold naturally. This does not mean ignoring issues or avoiding communication, but it means approaching them with calmness rather than fear. Letting go of possession does not weaken love. It refines it. It removes the tension that comes from trying to hold on to something too tightly. In its place, there is a sense of ease. You begin to appreciate the other person not as someone you own, but as someone you are fortunate to share time and experience with. In this way, love becomes lighter, yet more meaningful. It is no longer driven by the need to secure, but by the willingness to understand and to be fully present in each moment that is shared. Attachment often disguises itself as love because it creates intensity. It brings strong emotions, a sense of closeness, and the feeling that someone is deeply important to your happiness. But beneath this intensity, there is often something quieter and more fragile: fear, the fear of losing, the fear of being replaced, the fear of not being enough. When attachment becomes the foundation of a relationship, these fears begin to shape how you think, feel, and act. At first, attachment can feel comforting. You want to be close, to spend time together, to feel connected as often as possible. But slowly, this desire can turn into dependency. Your sense of emotional balance starts to rely on the presence, attention, or behavior of the other person. When things go well, you feel at ease. When something changes, even slightly, your mind begins to question and react. This is where fear quietly enters. A delayed message may create unnecessary worry. A change in tone may feel like distance. A moment of independence from the other person may be interpreted as a loss of interest. These reactions are not always based on reality, but on the attachment you have formed. The more attached you become, the more sensitive you are to any perceived change. Fear then begins to influence behavior. You may seek constant reassurance, not because something is wrong, but because you need to feel secure again. You may overthink small situations, creating meaning where there is none. You may try to control outcomes, hoping to prevent any possibility of loss. In doing so, the natural ease of the relationship begins to fade. Attachment also creates expectations, often unspoken ones. You expect the other person to respond in certain ways, to prioritize you in certain moments, to behave according to what makes you feel safe. When these expectations are not met, disappointment arises, not necessarily because the other person has done something wrong, but because reality did not match the image you held. Over time, this cycle becomes exhausting. The relationship starts to carry tension instead of feeling calm and supportive. It begins to feel uncertain and demanding. Both people may feel the pressure, even if they cannot clearly explain it. What was once a source of comfort becomes a source of stress. Letting go of excessive attachment does not mean becoming distant or indifferent. It means shifting from dependency to understanding. You begin to see that no person can guarantee permanence, and no relationship can remove all uncertainty. When you accept this, the fear begins to lose its hold. You start to allow space for yourself and for the other person. You no longer react immediately to every change. You observe more, assume less. You understand that connection does not need to be constant to be real. This creates a different kind of stability, one that does not rely on control. In this space, love becomes clearer. It is no longer clouded by fear or driven by the need to secure something. Instead, it becomes an experience of appreciation and presence. You value what is there without constantly worrying about what might not be. When attachment loosens, fear gradually fades, and what remains is something quieter but far more steady. A connection that is not based on holding on tightly, but on allowing things to exist as they are, without force. The state of your inner world quietly shapes every interaction you have. It influences how you interpret words, how you respond to situations, and how you experience on connection. When there is restlessness within you, even peaceful moments can feel uncertain. When there is clarity within you, even difficult conversations can be approached with calmness. Many people focus on changing the other person or improving the external aspects of a relationship, but overlook the fact that their own inner condition is constantly affecting the dynamic. If you carry unresolved tension, it will appear in your tone, your reactions, and your expectations. If you carry insecurity, it may show up as doubt, overthinking, or the need for reassurance. These patterns do not stay hidden, they become part of the relationship. When you begin to cultivate patience within yourself, you notice a shift. You become less reactive, more willing to listen, and more open to understanding. Small misunderstandings no longer escalate quickly because there is space between what you feel and how you respond. This space allows you to choose your actions more carefully. Clarity also plays an important role. When you understand your own needs and boundaries, you communicate more honestly. You no longer expect the other person to guess what you feel. This reduces confusion and builds trust over time. Inner peace creates a sense of stability that does not depend on constant reassurance. You feel grounded even when situations are uncertain. This steadiness allows the relationship to breathe without the pressure of always needing everything to be perfect. As your inner state becomes more balanced, your way of loving changes naturally. It becomes less about reacting and more about responding with awareness. In the end, what you are missing about love is not something distant or complicated. It is something subtle, something quiet, something that begins within you. Love was never meant to be a struggle to hold on, nor a search to be completed by someone else. It is a way of being, one that grows through awareness, deepens through presence, and becomes steady when it is no longer driven by fear. When you begin to see this clearly, your approach to love changes. You stop chasing intensity and start valuing peace. You stop seeking constant reassurance and start building inner stability. You no longer ask love to prove itself again and again. Instead, you allow it to unfold naturally. And in that shift, something powerful happens. Relationships become less about filling a void and more about sharing a journey. There is less pressure, less confusion, and more understanding. You begin to experience is connection not as something fragile that can be lost at any moment, but as something meaningful that exists in how you show up. Because in truth, love has always been present. It is your awareness of it that makes all the difference.